Ugly Duckling Oboes is dedicated to the development of young oboe players. They provide quality handmade oboe reeds, private lessons, and high-quality oboe sales, rentals, and consignments. The oboes that they rent are conservatory mechanism oboes that include the left-hand F key and low B-flat key. All are maintained by oboe-specific technicians. In-person lessons are available as well as virtual lessons for students who live outside the geographic area or have transportation or schedule challenges. They also offer online college audition coaching for high school juniors and seniors who plan to audition to be music majors. Visit uglyducklingoboes.com for more details on how you can set yourself up for success and sign up for their newsletter. Thank you for your support, Ugly Duckling Oboes.
Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH, all caps, no spaces. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at chemicalcityreeds.com.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
Hey, girl.
Hey.
I am coming to you from my house in Colorado with my podcast mic.
So you've unpacked and the podcast mic has been located.
I have located the microphone. It was in a box labeled podcast mic, shockingly enough. But yeah, we finished out our move. We have unpacked, dare I say, most of the boxes. It's been a journey. I feel like we've been moving for like 2 months.
I think it has spanned 4 or 5 episodes. So yeah, that would be 2.5 months.
I think so. Anyway, my summer of complaints, I have a half summer of complaints is over. And now it's going to be a transition to the rest of my summer of luxury.
Love that. I mean, we still have a nice month of summer vacation to go.
I'm excited about it.
Me too. I mean, we are heading down to IDRS next week, many of us, both of us.
Mm-hmm.
But when I come back, I am taking a break. Like, I am going to put my bassoon down and I will pick it back up when the academic year commences. I usually try to do a beginning of August practice break and just break from work. Like, even there have been a couple like, oh, can we schedule a meeting? And it's like, oh, I'm not scheduling any meetings during this time. We'll have to look in the second half of August. Like, I'm having boundaries.
I love this.
And it's making me very excited. But that's all to say that first we have IDRS. Do you want to give a little preview of what we're doing at IDRS?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're not doing anything together. I think it's the first year in recent memory.
Weird. It's weird.
We're 2 separate entities at IDRS this year.
Except I'm going to be following you around like a little lost puppy the whole time. Be like, Jackie, are you busy? Can you get some coffee with me? Jackie, do you want to hang out with me?
Well, and I won't be hard to locate because a lot of what I'm going to be doing is sitting at the director's table in the exhibit area. So I should be pretty easy to find.
Well, I'll be sure to like come by like, I don't know, once an hour and just leave you a little chocolate or something.
I would love that. Up. Yes. Any listeners who feel free to come by, come say hi.
Okay, so my IDRS schedule is I'm going to be performing on the Monday night gala concert. Our listeners know that I have been working on this project, bringing Elizabeth Gearing's music back to life. So I will be performing her suite for oboe and piano on that concert. And I'm so excited to share it with everyone. It's absolutely unique. I've never played anything in this style before. And I think, well, I hope that you're going to love it. And then I will be on the Read Talk panel. And I'm also going to be leading with Ari Cohen Mann, the Thursday LGBTQ plus affinity space. So I will be there. I will be visible. I will be present. And come say hi to me because my bestie's busy.
I am busy and I'm actually no regret. I'm super excited about everything I'm doing, but I am kind of like, oh, I submitted proposals like an IDRS member, and I have the schedule of a member of the IDRS executive board for the first time, and I did not really anticipate how these two would interact, but I'll be playing on the Sunday night concerto gala. I'll be doing Connor Cheese Concerto for Bassoon and Strings, which has been my project this year. Well, it's going to be very cool because Connor, who is Navajo, first of all, it will be on Navajo homelands, which is super cool. And two, Connor will be there. Connor will be in attendance. So it will be my one opportunity to play for the composer live with orchestra. And yeah, so I'm super excited about that. I'm really excited to share this piece because while I'm touring it and recording it during my exclusivity period, at the end of this academic year, when that ends, I want everyone to play it.
I'm sure they will too, because Connor's writing is so gorgeous.
It's so beautiful. So I'm really excited to. And it helps with like you and I have been talking about nervousness and feeling pressure. It really helps to feel more like this isn't about me. This is about being, and in your case as well, an ambassador for repertoire that I just feel really passionate about. And then I'm doing a master class on repertoire by BIPOC composers that I'm very excited about. And I will be moderating with Gina Moore, the BIPOC affinity space. But I will also be around. I'll be helping with the competitions and just kind of at everything. I was telling you and an upcoming guest the last hour that I had kind of hoped to be able to like really just attend everything, but I was a little surprised by the amount of scheduling obligations. And so if I can't attend whatever event you listener are playing on, please know that in spirit, I'm there cheering you on, wishing I could listen. But yeah, there's just a lot of things to do.
Well, I remember also last year you were telling me that if I didn't watch the entire series of Sister Wives before we got to IDRS, you were going to dump me as a friend.
Right.
So how does that threat stand currently?
Well, I don't know that we'll be able to get to any Sister Wives sightseeing. So maybe I can amend that threat to if you are out in the wild of Flagstaff. And actually, let me extend this to all of our listeners as well. Should you be out in the wild in Flagstaff and see a member of the Brown family, the subject of TLC's Sister Wives, one of my favorite shows, you are obligated to get out your phone and take a photo of them and give me the full story and context, please.
Become Jackie's personal paparazzi.
Please, and thank you. But speaking of being excited to go to conference and see all of our double read friends, you didn't have to wait. You hooked up with some double read friends of the podcast recently, didn't you?
Oh my God. This was okay. I moved to Colorado, and within 1 week of setting foot in the state of Colorado, I was in the Barton Cane factory space. It was so awesome. I went to go visit Julie and David, and they showed me around their like factory shed. It is, Jackie, it is so impressive.
Really?
Yes. They built all of these machines and programmed all of these like things by themselves. It is phenomenal, actually. It's really impressive.
Obviously, we all know and love and are so impressed by Barton Cane, but you saying that just made me think, like, what do you think the neighbors think? Like, what's out in your garage? A bunch of cane or reeds? What kind of reeds? Oh, bassoon reeds, oboe reeds. Like, what?
Man, I had such a good time.
Did you get to meet Lucille? That's the question.
I met Lucille. First of all, celebrity. I was starstruck. I met Lucille and we had brunch and it was delicious. I mean, it was just like the most delightful afternoon. I genuinely had such a good time and I'm genuinely so impressed with them. Like the ingenuity behind what they're doing is phenomenal. So,
well, and I was just about to make a joke. This is not sponsored content, but actually it is. Barton Cane are sponsors.
It 100% is.
We have been paid to say these things.
But me visiting them was not SpawnCon. That was not part of the deal. That was just something I wanted to do because how could I possibly be in this state and not immediately go see them?
I mean, obviously. Well, we have to wrap this up because we are dishing for the first time in our podcast history the morning of an episode release. So we need to push stop recording so I can edit this and we can get y'all the episode. And we hope to be seeing y'all soon in Flagstaff or otherwise.
See y'all soon. Come say hi to me because I'm going to be lonely.
Consider buying your processed oboe and bassoon cane from those friendly folks over at Barton Cane. Processed with care and precision for your everyday reed-making needs. Take the pain and injury out of reed-making by letting Barton Cane do the hard, repetitive, boring stuff. Free up time for practicing, happy hours, hikes, baking, and spending time with friends and family. Barton Cane, here for you. Visit www.bartoncane.com.
Hey oboists! Have you ever found it difficult to sort out when and how to find a new oboe or English horn? Oboe Chicago streamlines the process, providing personal and professional consultation and a large selection of lovely instruments. The process feels comfortable and thorough. Selection includes Effleuré of Paris, Howarth of London, Covey oboes, and Fox products. For a current listing of Oboe Chicago's selection, please visit www.oboechicago.com. For a credit of $100 towards shipping, mention Double Reed Dish when you call or email Shauna. That's oboechicago.com.
We are so happy to be talking with Virginia McDowell today, Principal Oboe in the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
We always start with the same first question, which is to get to know our artists a bit better by hearing how they started to play the instrument. So when and why did you begin to play the oboe?
Well, I actually started playing piano when I was 4 years old. And so I always liked music. I knew I wanted to do the band route in middle school. And so I already kind of had my sights on that and deciding what instrument I wanted to play from kind of a young age. And it just so happened, my brother played clarinet. I didn't want to be like him. I wanted to be different. But my cousin played the oboe. She was a few years older than me, and I just thought she was the coolest person, and I wanted to be like her. That was really the only reason. And so I showed up. I was probably the only sixth grader that showed up and was like, I want to play the oboe. And they were like, who is this girl who even knows what an oboe is at this age? And, you know, they had the whole thing where they had like the reeds set out. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad in hindsight, but the band director told me that I shouldn't play the oboe because my fingers were too long, that I should play the bassoon instead. And I think that they probably just really needed someone to play bassoon, and they saw that I had experience playing piano and not many kids show up wanting to play either instrument. And yeah, but it's funny because in hindsight, that gave me a lot of drive because in my mind, he was like, oh, you're never going to be any good at oboe, which is definitely not what he said. But I read it that way. And so it made me like really passionate about wanting to prove him wrong. So I keep that as like, it's no secret that I keep that I was motivated by spite from an early age.
That is the perfect motivation to play the
Yeah,
oboe.
definitely. I mean, at least it was for me. It was just wanting to prove people wrong. And yeah, I mean, I guess my fingers are a little longer. I don't think they're like unusually long. I also don't know. Maybe Jackie could say if having particularly long fingers is like helpful to play the bassoon. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of a strange thing in hindsight to single out, but I said, no, I'm playing the oboe and here I am, still play.
It wouldn't hurt. What you more hear is people saying my hands are too small to play the bassoon. And again, I find that's maybe a product of a music education curriculum that can leave something to be desired in terms of double reeds. There's kind of these myths, and don't start a student on the bassoon. They're too small to play the bassoon. There are some people, but overall, it's not quite the obstacle that it's sometimes presented to. But I've never heard of a finger length requirement for play.
I don't know. Maybe I've just like spun it out of control in my head, but I specifically remember having this like dream to play the oboe and then being like, I mean, I still got to do it, but being kind of like crushed, being told that I wouldn't be any good at it, that I would be better off if I played bassoon instead, and that I could really succeed. So who knows? Maybe I would have been God's gift to the bassoon, but I don't know. It's the world will never know.
Your defective oboe fingers.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be a professional oboist?
So when one of my first teachers was Eric Bear, who now plays principal in Rochester, but at the time he was a doctoral student at Rice and played principal in the Houston Grand Opera and Ballet. And wow, even just saying that, I feel really lucky that I studied with him when I was in the 7th grade. Oh my God. But I remember specifically, I had a really rough 6th grade. I had a teacher who, again, I don't want to shame anyone, but kind of didn't show up for lessons, and I never had reads to play on, and I almost quit. And my mom, thankfully, was like, no, I know like Virginia really likes music. It was never something she intended for me to do professionally, but she didn't want me to quit band after 6th grade. So she found Eric by calling Rice, and it was such a quick change. I went from kind of wanting to quit the oboe to I went to a performance of him. The ballet was doing the Bach double concerto with violin and dancers on stage. And I mean, I had never, I don't really remember much about the performance other than like being up high and seeing my teacher playing at the front of the pit and being like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I want to do that. And I didn't really know what that meant yet. Like I hadn't even really seen him play in the orchestra, but I thought he was the coolest person and I wanted to be the coolest person just like him. And so for the next few years, I just told everyone, I'm going to be a professional oboist. Like I'm going to play in an orchestra someday. And it wasn't until I got to high school and I made Texas All-State, and I played in the orchestra. And the first piece I ever played with like a full orchestra was Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. And I remember the very first rehearsal in this like hotel ballroom, and the strings all came in, and I was like in the middle of that sound. And it's a feeling I still have a lot, but I just remember getting goosebumps, and I was like, well, this is it. That was the right decision. And yeah, it was really just like the feeling of being a part of something. It wasn't really about playing oboe. It started as wanting to be cool, cool like my teacher, but then it kind of turned into just like wanting to be a part of something that special. and wanting to share that special thing with other people. Because I was just like, wow, I can't believe that people don't know this feeling.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, that
did.
is literally so beautiful, but the irony of wanting to play the oboe because it would make you cooler is hilarious to me.
I know. Well, I mean, that just goes to show how much of a dork I was. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of oboe players relate to that, like, that was the level of coolness that I was aspiring to. Like, wow, I could really be cooler if I played oboe really well.
I have a very similar origin story to you,
Oh,
so I
really?
relate to that very much.
Okay.
Yeah, my first orchestra piece was Tchaikovsky's Sixth. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's definitely a good one. That'll do it.
that'll do it.
Yeah.
So could you walk us through your training and educational journey and maybe speak to being a high schooler, knowing that you were wanting to pursue music collegiately and kind of how you made those decisions?
Yeah. So like I said, I started basically my first teacher was Eric, and then I studied with Colin Gatwood through most of my high school career. He plays in the Houston Symphony. And he also is the son of Eldon Gatwood. Some people may know that name because he used to play with Mark Lipsky. But anyway, Colin was just I couldn't be more like thankful for him as a teacher. Just went above and beyond, and he kind of is the teacher that I want to be. Like he really inspired me to be that way. But anyway, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like none of my family members were musicians. I mean, my dad openly admits to being completely tone deaf, although I don't really buy into that. But so they definitely didn't know, although they were very supportive, thankfully. But like I think I got a late start in a lot of things. Like I didn't really join the Houston Youth Symphony until I was a junior. I mostly just kind of like practiced hard, tried to do well at like the local like stuff. And it wasn't until later when I was like, oh, I went to Interlochen, the arts camp after I don't know, couple summers. And I think that was where I started kind of meeting other people that were doing the same thing. And that's where I realized, oh, I never even heard of these schools. I didn't know where to apply. And even by the time I was a senior, I still felt a little bit like I was just kind of applying to random schools just because I applied to Oberlin where I ended up going for undergrad, spoiler, because my teacher had gone there and his wife had gone there. And I didn't really know anything about the teacher, honestly. And I think I auditioned for like 7 other schools and I got into a bunch of them, but I remember going to Oberlin and having a lesson with Mr. Walters, and it was just like an instant fit. And I kind of didn't look back. And so, yeah, my underground training, again, I feel very lucky with the teachers that I've had. Robert Walters was just an incredible teacher and still is, honestly. He's still very supportive. And then after that, I did like a post-bachelor's thing. It's kind of like an artist diploma, but they don't call it that, at Curtis with Richard Woodhams, which was obviously amazing being at Curtis and studying with him. I mean, 2 of my former teachers had studied with him, so it was kind of like studying with my pedagogical grandfather in a way, I guess. And then after that, I did my master's at Rice University with Robert Atherholt, which kind of felt like coming home in a way because that was my very first teacher, was studying with him for his doctorate way back when, so I kind of went full circle.
Yeah. So did you grow up on Philadelphia style reeds and then you probably learned that style from the beginning?
It's hard to say because as a 7th grader, I don't think I really knew what I was playing on. Because, Eric studied with Woodhams, but he also studied with John Mack. And I think that he had kind of a mixture of Cleveland and Philadelphia. Now, again, this is just like memory of a middle schooler. I don't really know. But I do remember that his reads definitely had like a lot to blow against. I had to work a little harder, and I think maybe because I was just young. But then when I studied with Colin, I think his reads were a little more free-blowing for me. And even though he didn't study at Curtis, I think I could be wrong about this, but his teacher, James Caldwell, I think studied with Delancey at Curtis. So I think even there I had kind of some Philadelphia influence. And like these minute differences in reads I'm talking about, I think they were really small. Like I felt like there was a general consistency in my read training, kind of to answer your question more directly. That
Yeah, I'm always really curious about the Philadelphia reed making style. And, I've had the pleasure and privilege of playing with you on a couple of occasions, and you just sound so fantastic.
Oh my God, thank you.
And it's just this like lightness, but it still has a lot of complexity to it. So, maybe this is a question for later, but I'd love to get into reads like later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm always afraid to talk about reads because, I feel like everyone doesn't really, well, maybe other people don't feel this way. I feel like I don't really know what I'm doing.
Does anybody know what they're doing?
Yeah. So I'm always changing. So it's like every time I give a read class, I feel like I always have to give like a million disclaimers of like, well, this is what I'm doing right now, and whatever works for you should work. It's just.
So could we hear maybe a bit about what happened as you were embarking on your professional journey and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I started taking auditions kind of early. In hindsight, I probably wasn't really ready for the job in the same way that I am now. But yeah, I started taking auditions kind of like halfway through my junior year at Oberlin. And I think a lot of that was Mr. Walters' whole mentality. I'm sure other people have said this about him, but it's like using experiences as a laboratory to make yourself better. Like rather than going into auditions to win them, just using them to get better. I mean, within reason, because auditioning costs money, whatever, like don't show up to something that you're completely unprepared for. But auditioning, in my mind, is kind of like a skill, just like playing in tune is. You just have to get used to the practice of it. At least I did. I mean, some people maybe are more naturally gifted, but I feel like if I don't take an audition for a while, I don't do as well because I'm just out of practice. And that's where, mock auditions come into play. But so I started early, and I was always like the bridesmaid, but never the bride kind of situation. I made finals a lot, but never kind of sealed the deal. And in fact, in 2018, when I was at Rice, was when I had literally just started playing on this new oboe. And I kind of just went to this audition in New Orleans, not really expecting much. I wasn't prepared. It was at the end of the year. And I made finals again. But I was like, okay, it's great. I did well. And I didn't really think much of it. They had called me to sub in the next year after that. But then the things changed, and the person who was playing principal ended up leaving, and very last minute. And so because I had made finals in the previous year, they did like a last minute 1 year tape audition thing, and I sent in a tape, and I won that. So that's how I started in 2019 as a 1 year. And as you know, everything changed. There was supposed to be an audition for that job in May of 2020, and I kind of spent my whole season kind of panicking about that because there's a special kind of hell in auditioning for the job you've already been playing. I think maybe some people don't realize that they think that you have this like huge leg up, but in reality, like it's just so much pressure. And so, but then it didn't happen. It got canceled and COVID happened. And I kind of never thought I'd play again. They got rid of the position because it was vacant. And yeah, for a while, I was just kind of only playing as a sub. I just feel like it's important to be honest about my journey because it's not as like, I think a lot of people think that everyone's journey is like this trajectory upwards, and mine was definitely like a lot of falling very hard. But yeah, so I was a sub, and then I was a 1 year on English horn, and then finally they had a real audition. This was in the spring of 2022, which I won. And now I'm here, and I only just recently got tenure because I had to go through the full 2 year process like everyone else.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, it felt like such a long path, but I'm here and I'm very happy. I mean, I love my job, I love my colleagues, and I don't hold it against anyone that what happened, because it's not anyone's fault. Like, no one predicted the pandemic, and I understand that they had to try to save money, and yeah, it's water under the bridge now.
Can I ask a bit of a follow-up? So you spoke about how auditioning is a skill, not unlike playing in tune or other, aspects of our professionalism. Could you expand a bit on that and what it means to you, or how it feels to you to be honing that skill?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? I think it's getting used to what the preparation feels like, and also getting used to what it feels like on the day of. Because there's always a certain level of just randomness that happens. Like, I mean, I've just had everything that can go wrong has gone wrong on audition day. I wish I could think of like a good example off the bat, but like sometimes you don't even get a warm-up room. Sometimes you have to walk up a flight of stairs right before you play. Like, there's always something. And so I think getting used to that idea and not expecting it to go perfectly is a skill. Like, you just have to kind of, at least for me, I felt like I needed practice with just going with the flow and not getting frustrated, like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. Like, then you're not focusing on the music, right? But then the preparation is just kind of like, how long do you start for looking at the music before an audition? Like, there's a certain amount of time where maybe you start getting sick of the excerpts, or or you're not prepared enough. And I don't really have the answer to that. Honestly, I'm saying that, and I think it depends on the audition and the person. Like, if it's an opera audition, I probably would spend a little bit more time because I don't play operas as often and I don't know that repertoire as well. But for some auditions, I probably played those excerpts 100 times. And what I always tell my students is, like, to remember, when you don't have enough time to prepare for something, that you've actually been preparing your whole life, that it's not up to those 2 weeks. You feel like, oh, if I don't practice enough, then it's over. It's like, well, no, you've been learning the oboe this whole time. And it's just, life happens. And honestly, a lot of the auditions that I've done the best at have been the ones I felt somehow least prepared for. I don't know. I think there's some of it is an element of getting on stage and not caring as much. And I think that might be a more personal thing. Like, I don't want to tell people don't prepare. Like, that's not what I mean at all. You definitely should prepare, do the mock auditions. But I think the final, like, cherry on top is like a level of just not caring about the result, if possible. When you're actually out there, because otherwise you'll just get like freaked out and like try to, I don't know. It becomes less about the music. And I think, as someone who's now sat on the other side of the screen a lot, you can kind of sense the difference in people that are just trying to, like, make music and convey a point of view, if that makes sense. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but.
No, I really think you are. And I think there's not necessarily a level of improvisation, but maybe a freshness to that approach.
Yes.
That comes off as musical. Whereas if something sounds overly planned and like stuffy and I don't know.
Yeah. That's definitely part of it. I think, sometimes the best I felt was when I kind of felt like I was having ideas on the fly. But I think it's also, like, mentally for me, I tend to I'm a generally pretty anxious person. I don't think that's any secret. That's something I've had to like work on a lot. It's funny, like I don't think I particularly get nervous when I play oboe or like in auditions, like compared to some people. I haven't had to battle with nerves so much, but it's more of like playing things with a question mark is something I have had to fight against. Like seeking approval. And I think that's what I meant by that's the kind of thing that comes off on the other side of the screen is someone who's playing something in a way that's seeking approval. And I think if you're caring a lot about winning or the result, or you like this, everything is relying on this, then you're, at least for me, I was playing in a way that was more approval seeking, not to like offend, I just want to play as perfectly in a box as possible. And in my experience, again, on the other side is just like, when you're kind of listening to the same thing over and over again, the people that stand out are the ones that really have a point of view and there's no question mark. And whether or not you, like I've many times have written like, well, I don't agree with this point of view, but I'm just glad you have one. It was just like, wow, finally I'm awake. So, yeah, so that I think just having a point of view is a big thing for me and sticking with it.
How has your perspective shifted now that you've been principal oboe?
You mean like on the job or just like
Yeah, like on the job in terms of what the day-to-day is like. What were you expecting it to be and what is it actually?
you know, there's a lot more like management aspects that I didn't know about. This is like not musically related at all, but a lot of my job is balancing castings, like making sure that because we have a 3-person section and not everyone needs to play all the time, and like making sure that I'm balancing everyone's schedules, like that kind of falls on me. So that's something I didn't expect, which is, a lot of stress, like, wanting to make sure that everyone's happy and feels fulfilled. It's kind of, thankfully I have really great colleagues, so I've never really run into any problems, but it's still like something I take very seriously. And also now more so that I have tenure, but finding subs and like that kind of stuff, like making sure that we hire good people like Galit, who just played with us recently. Awesome. Yeah, so that's all the non-musical stuff. But then there's also like committees and stuff. I just like that's the kind of thing that like school does not prepare you for. Like next year, I'm supposed to be on personnel committee and programming committee, which the latter of which I'm very excited about because I have a lot of ideas about programming and I'm excited to be a part of that. Although I think that might be kind of a LPO specific thing because we're musician run, so we have a lot more like say in what we do. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I didn't really expect. The job itself, I think what I've realized is that if the conductor is not saying anything to you, that's a good thing. I think when I was in school, when you're rehearsing all the time, like, in the Rice Orchestra, for instance, we had several hours of rehearsal 3 days a week for like months for a concert. Whereas on the job, we only have a few days. And so they don't have time to talk to everyone. And again, as someone who like, I think, you spend your entire time taking lessons and like seeking approval, like you want to play things in a way that people are appreciating or like that you feel like you're doing the right thing. And then suddenly I didn't have any like feedback really. Like I didn't have a teacher telling me, oh yeah, that's good or not good. Like either way, it was, at least I was knowing. But on the job, like as long as you're doing your job well, no one's going to really say anything to you. The only time they say things are if it's a problem. So that was something I had to get used to, was just, again, like being more confident in my own ideas, that I'm not going to have someone be like, that was great, Virginia. Like, not that I feel like I need a pat on the back all the time, but as like an anxious person, it's something I had to kind of like start giving myself my own pat on the back, like, that was okay. You got through it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel
So
like this
relatable.
field attracts that personality.
Yeah.
Like that personality really loves getting into music. And then you're right, once you are a professional, that feedback loop goes away and you have to provide it to yourself.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes still feel like, man, I kind of like wish or like miss taking lessons because of that, because like I just, yeah, just having some kind of feedback when I've had feedback for so long. Like if I think about the fact that I started playing oboe when I was like 11, and I was kind of in school until 2020 because I finished my master's degree online after I started in New Orleans. Like that's a pretty long chunk of my life that I was regularly, and I also took piano lessons from the time I was 4, like I said before, and so always having someone giving feedback and then suddenly like no feedback except for like the occasional tenure review letter, which is only like a couple sentences over a span of months. And, like I would ask my colleagues, I think that's, trying to, especially if you're under tenure review, like asking people what they're thinking is good, because they're not going to tell you. That's been my experience. Generally, they're not going to tell you unless you ask. Because people don't want to give unsolicited advice. So yeah, but at a certain point, like just having, again, confidence in what you're doing. And yeah, I think at this point, I'm not going to be asking people for advice all the time. I just got to trust that what I'm doing is good.
So this is, of course, a double read podcast, and I have been itching to talk about reads. So can you tell us, like, however much you want to tell us about your reed making style and maybe the equipment that you use and what you look for in a reed?
Sure. So my very first reed lessons, honestly, like this was before I was making reeds for myself, but I remember Eric wrote, like he opened my spiral book and he just wrote like the 3 rules of reed making and wrote 1, 2, 3 and put sharp knife, sharp knife, sharp knife. So that's like, obviously that was like, I was only in 8th grade, but I still remember that. And then my other first lesson with Colin on reeds, he had this cartoon that was, it just said something like instructions for crafting a toy boat or something, like out of wood. And it was just a block of wood. And then the instructions said like, scrape away anything that's not a boat. And so that was what he told me reed making is. That was my first lesson about it. And it's funny. He's like, look, you've been looking at reeds this entire time you've been playing. And so you know what they look like. So just scrape anything that doesn't look like a reed to you. So that was
Easy.
the kind of like approach of being, kind of just like free form a little bit. But yeah, once we got a little more nitty gritty, I think my main priorities have always been just comfort. Honestly, I just don't relate to wanting to be uncomfortable when I play. I mean, obviously I do it all the time. We play double reed instruments. It's not always going to work, but as a general goal, I'm happiest when I'm most comfortable. And for me, that means it has to respond in a certain way. Like I think response is something I look for a lot, and it doesn't, not like, so responsive that it has nothing to blow against, because then that's also not very comfortable. But yeah, I think you were asking maybe a bit about like what the Philadelphia school is, and I don't really know if I can like speak to that generally, but what I feel like I hear in a lot of Curtis or Curtis adjacent students or professionals is like a really wide range of color. That's what I was always really attracted to about the sound, is that it's, it has lows and highs and everything in between, and just like very flexible sounding. And so that's what I've always wanted to try to do in my own playing, is just how many colors can I get? And that's kind of where my reed making style, if you could call it that, comes from. Just like, I like a lot of vibrancy. I like having like ease of response and comfort. I like having stability, but obviously not too much, so it doesn't, like, it can be really uncomfortable if it's like so, stuck. Like, again, then I can't really feel like I have that flexibility. Yeah, just like range of color, and a lot of that I think comes from the sides of the tip. Like a very thin tip. I mean, I know everyone's kind of going for that, but also balancing the tip into the heart and blah, 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 everything that, teachers always tell us to do. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I found very specifically has helped with my reeds, and anytime I have like a student who's working on reeds, I notice that it's like the bottom corners of the tip, like where the heart is, that tend to have a lot of bulk, and I find that's where I get my most, like, if I kind of clean that up a lot, and not make it thinner than the rest of the tip, but making sure that that's not like a big W shape. That's where I get like a lot of the zing, I think, in my playing. Whether or not people like that or not is not up to me, but that's I don't feel comfortable playing on a reed that doesn't have that finesse, I guess. Yeah. That answers your question.
Yeah. What about equipment? What's your setup?
So I use a Ross gouging machine now. And I have a Mac Pfeiffer shape that I've been using for years. And I think I have some old Clotan staples that I use. Trying to think. Cane, I don't know. The cane that I used to use just stopped supplying, so now I don't know what I'm doing with that. Am I forgetting anything? Reed setup. I play on a Luray. I actually just got a new oboe recently from Mr. Seimer. I had always played on AKs, but I decided to try this, like the B plus model, which I guess is based on the old B series. Yeah, so it's a learning curve for me, because even though it's a Luray, it's still slightly different, and because I've always played on kind of the same kind of oboe, the tendencies are different, so I'm just getting used to that. But yeah, can't think of anything else setup wise that would be interesting.
Could we hear about your experience with Theo Chandler's Oboe Concerto, premiering and recording that? Tell us about that experience.
Sure. So he wrote that piece for me back in, I believe it was 2019 that he wrote it. I can't remember if he started it in 2018 or 2019, but he applied for a grant through the Presser Foundation at Rice and the whole purpose was to write an oboe concerto, because the oboe is his favorite piece, or his favorite instrument, sorry. And he always felt like he wanted to write. He had so many ideas for the oboe that he wanted to put in a piece, and that he wanted to have like a substantial like comparison to like the major works on like a piano or violin. 'Cause, like, I think the Strauss is probably like the longest oboe concerto that we have. But this one ended up being even longer. He just had so many ideas. And I think he even said that at one point it was 7 movements and he had to cut it out because it wasn't as good. So it's 6 movements. Wow. And each movement is supposed to be like a different character that the oboe is trying to embody. And yeah, so he obviously got the grant, and I then proceeded to win my job in LVO, I got the 1 year, I mean. And so I started in New Orleans and so it was a real challenge trying to figure out when I would come back and record. And I kind of remember like finishing up some like Christmas concerts in New Orleans, and then kind of scrambling my way over to Houston and recording with some it was some Shepherd School of Music alums and current students. And yeah, I did the premiere and then we recorded it over, I think like a day and a half. We just did like 3 sessions and it was exhausting. I don't know if you've ever done like that much recording in that short of time. Maybe for string players, it's okay, but I was really struggling by the end. And you know, of course, like I think the recording ended up amazing, honestly, but I still like it's always hard to listen to yourself play because I remember what it was like to do the recording and how, you know, tough it was. But the piece is just, I can't speak highly enough of it. It's just like it really showcases the oboe so well. And even though it's long, I don't feel like I just performed it in New York. We finally got to do another performance with the Riverside Symphony. We got to perform it at Alice Tully Hall, which was an incredible experience. And yeah, even this time, I didn't feel like he wrote in like substantial amounts of rest and like the way it's written, it's like very physically difficult for it's technically difficult. There's a lot of like technical stuff in there and yeah, but for the most part it's written very well for the oboe and I hope that it gets more performances. And actually the 5th movement of it is he strips away the orchestra and it becomes just oboe and piano. And so I've always seen that movement as being like a really nice short little piece to add to like a recital or something. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So when can we hear it?
Oh, you can hear it right now. It's on Spotify, all streaming platforms actually. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And this is not your only collaboration with Theo Chandler, because I remember that you had posted a video a few years ago of the solo oboe piece in the art gallery.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember listening to that and thinking, wow, I really like this composer. And then I went to his website. I was like, oh, concerto.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us more about that solo oboe piece also, because I think a lot of people would be into it.
Yeah, that piece is awesome. I wish I had played it better. You know, the funny thing about that performance was that was kind of like in the very beginning of the pandemic. Rice was like trying to support the students and composers and so he wrote that piece for me to play and it was based on an art installation. I'm blank. I think it was Solowit was the artist. But anyway, the piece was great, but I hadn't really been practicing that much because like it had been a few months into the pandemic and like I don't know about anyone else, but I was not very motivated. I didn't know what was going on with my life. And that was really the only thing that kept me going was that piece actually. And so I'm very thankful for it. But in that recording, I remember the guy that was miking it. I think he was definitely more of like a film producer and not like so familiar with oboe. And he put this like, you can even see it in some of the camera shots that he put the mic like on the floor right under my bell. And so you could kind of hear it on the recording that it's like, oh, it's a lot of reed. You know, everything I was talking about earlier about reeds, it's like, well, you could definitely hear that tip. But but you know, all of us
I liked it. I liked it enough that I emailed Theo Chandler and I was like, hey, I'm interested in this piece.
That's great. That makes me so happy because you know, we're always like so hard on ourselves and ultimately I think the most important thing is just sharing with the audience and if people enjoyed it then I did my job and hopefully he gets some more performances out of it because I think it's hard to write for solo oboe and I think he did a really great job with that piece and it definitely deserves more performances. Yeah, he's written a lot of stuff for oboe over the years. I don't know how much, you know, as you get older, you start promoting stuff less that you wrote when you were younger. So I don't know how much of it is on his website anymore. But yeah, you can definitely tell in those pieces that he had a lot of experience writing for the oboe and is very knowledgeable. And he was a clarinet player himself, so he, knows a lot about woodwind playing, and I think it really shows. Yeah.
I love it.
Did we hear about a favorite memory that you have of a past performance?
Well, I have two that come to mind, if it's okay, but they're kind of related. And they're both times that I got to perform with my teacher. So when I was at Rice, at some point, I don't remember exactly the timeline, but the principal oboist of the Houston Symphony I randomly got some eye injury or something, and he got stuck in Mexico. It was this crazy story. And I think he's okay now. But they called me last minute to come in and sub for him, which was like, oh my God, I had never played with that orchestra ever. And to suddenly like jump in and play principal. I mean, it was Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, which isn't like the biggest part, but there's solos, and it was a lot to do last minute. But the second oboist was my teacher, Colin, and the principal flute was Airlie Doro, who's his wife. And so I grew up with them kind of. So even though I was like so nervous, they were like, I was sitting in between them, and it was just such a memorable experience for me, just like feeling like I had that support. And one thing I remember was I was trying really hard to like, just not say anything and just be like confident, whatever. But I did at one point, like I played something and I didn't like it. And I like remember like casually taking the reed out and putting it down. And I think my teacher knew me well enough, or Colin knew me well enough to know that it meant that I didn't like that reed. And he opened his wallet and he pulled out a $20 bill and put it on my stand. Which
That's
was,
hilarious.
yeah, he has a way of really like disarming people. Like he's just, he's just like, I want to be like him, just that kind of not so serious, but still professional. Like it's just the perfect balance. Yeah, that was a favorite moment. And then the other favorite moment I have to mention was kind of a similar experience a few years ago. I was just like kind of at home for the summer doing nothing in New Orleans because our season had just ended. And all of a sudden I got a call from Cleveland that Frank Rosenwein had COVID and they needed someone to come play the next day. Yeah, so I had to like fly out. I'm pretty sure like the same day or something. It was crazy. Just yeah. I honestly like barely remembered the experience because it was such a whirlwind. But yeah, and I mean it wasn't like a big program or anything. I think we were playing like Paul Simon covers or something. But I got to sit next to my teacher, Robert Walters. It was just the two of us.
God.
And yeah, no matter what we were playing, I still got to say, I got to play principal with the Cleveland Orchestra.
Yeah,
I didn't have a tuning aid. It was like a whole thing for me. And just, it was less about like that, but just both of those experiences stand out to me so much because I got to like just play next to the people that kind of taught me to do what I was doing in that moment. Those were, I think, like I said earlier, that and maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I think I realized that I don't really love the oboe per se. I mean, I do like the oboe, but that's not why I do it. I don't love playing the oboe. Like a lot of times it's honestly not very fun. But what I like about it is playing with other people. I like making music with other people and like seeing how what I do fits in with other people. And I think, yeah, those experiences stand out because they were times that I made music with my teachers, like very important figures in my musical path.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that will actually be a sentiment that a lot of people share.
Yeah. I don't mean to say that like I still think the oboe is so cool. Like I think it's a cool instrument. I'm more focusing on like, do I honestly love the experience of going to work and my reed suddenly doesn't work or I have water? It's like, no, like it sucks. Like a lot of what we do sucks. And a lot of people don't understand. I think that's the
Mhm.
most frustrating thing is just like feeling like all these things are happening and no one gets it. No one gets what I'm doing. You know? So that can be like alienating, but I think that the times that I were able to focus more on what I'm doing with other people are the times that I'm happiest. That just like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Well, it has come to our last question.
Okay.
This has been such a phenomenal way to spend an hour, and I can't believe we're at the end, but we always like to end with, what is your advice for a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I'm just trying to think of it like what kind of advice I would have liked to have. And I think the biggest thing that I've battled is I wish someone had told me to be less afraid of looking stupid.
Mm.
Like just point blank. That's something that I think I probably would have tried more things. I would have like asked more questions. If I, not to not to self-deprecate, obviously, like I've done okay, but I think that's if someone like once I got to that point where I started feeling more confident in just asking questions and being comfortable with what I didn't know, that kind of helped a lot. And I mean, just I think that kind of like transformed around sometime in my undergrad when I started realizing this. And I think it was something Mr. Walters said where I was talking about all these like people I was afraid to play for. And he said something about like, yeah, when I was your age, I was afraid of playing for this person and that person. And by the time I had my career, they were all dead. He was like, it didn't matter. He said, I know it's really like brutal, but he was like, it didn't matter what these people thought of me. What it mattered was what I got out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that kind of like shifted my thinking. And I started getting to the point where it's like, well, if someone's coming for a guest lesson here, I'm not going to just play the thing I know I'm best at just to show off. I'm going to play something that I feel like they could actually help me with, even if it makes me look bad.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think ultimately, and now that I'm on the other side, like as a teacher, seeing the students that like are obviously there to really learn something, I think that actually leaves a better impression in the long run anyway. So yeah, I guess that's long-winded way to answer your question. If I answered your question, I don't even remember what the original question was anymore.
No, that was beautiful and a perfect way to end.
Okay.
Virginia, thank you so much for joining us on Double Reed Dish. This was fabulous.
This was amazing. I'm just so glad that I got to do this, and thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed that delightful interview. Please don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever you are on social media and get your podcasts. And I don't know, that was awkwardly
I was
worded, but
really interested to see where that was
yeah,
going.
it is what it is. We have another episode later in the month, in the next month. Galit, who is that?
We had such an interesting, fascinating, wonderful conversation with Amanda Swain, who teaches bassoon at Sam Houston State University, is the principal bassoonist of the Houston Grand Opera Orchestra, and second bassoonist of the Houston Ballet Orchestra. Jackie, let's end this nerd parade.
Go make reads.